Hello and welcome to another edition of Addition. I'm your host, Addy Snowden, quantum life coach, helping you get happier, healthier, and wealthier by jumping into the reality of your dreams. You can book with me at calendly.com/additionpod. The QR code on the live stream and the show notes in the podcast have a link to my website where you can learn more about me. And before I get into today's amazing episode, go ahead and like and share this video, follow or subscribe if you aren't already. And let's get into the second edition of our Black Women Boss series. I'm so excited to bring you all Khayla McCoy, founder of Opal and strategy and analytics leader at Google. Khayla, how are you doing tonight?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you on the podcast or the show now. So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I am Khayla McCoy. I am the founder of Opal, which is a platform that really focuses on delivering culturally relevant personal finance education to Black women. So it's something that really spurred out of my own personal experience, trying to kind of educate myself about money. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to lead the company now and hoping to expand that impact. You also mentioned I'm at Google. So I'm a data analyst, people analytics at Google. And before I was at Google, I was at BlackRock and financial services. I also did a stint in consumer packaged goods at Estée Lauder and healthcare at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. So I've had kind of a winding career.
And an incredibly impressive career. Like those are some
Thank you.
huge names. I would love to learn more about your career journey. You mentioned like the type of companies, which are Fortune 500 companies, but like when you were in college, like did you do grad school? Like how did you specialize in analytics? Love to hear how you got where you are today.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my career was both very strategically planned and also very much an accident. So I'm from a very small town called Madisonville, Tennessee. I actually lovingly refer to it as a village because there's just so few people that live in that town. But I went to Spelman College, and that was kind of my first bout of exposure toward any kind of career opportunity. You know, growing up in Madisonville, a lot of the jobs were very like blue collar, which is perfectly fine. Like we obviously need those roles, but I didn't know really. And I was kind of on the precipice of that timeline before tech became a big boom. So I definitely wasn't thinking about people analytics. I wasn't thinking about data and strategy. I wasn't thinking about any of those things. But when I got to Spelman, I kind of the world really opened up to me. And so Spelman was really what led me to my first job in New York. And then, of course, I think we can all imagine New York was a whole new kind of set of exposure and experiences. And so I will say, like, I kind of took my first job, and that was like a trial run, I would say. It was in healthcare administration. I had majored in biology because I thought I might have wanted to be a doctor. But, you know, I knew pretty quickly that that role wasn't going to be a long-term fit for me. There were just other things that I wanted to do. And so I stayed at Sloan Kettering for about 2 years, and that was really kind of a great leadership preparation program, essentially, because you had to really learn leadership and maturity just really quickly in that environment. You're dealing with, you know, sometimes terminal patients and their families, and it was very, you know, emotionally draining. And so there was a lot that went into knowing how to navigate that environment. And then oddly enough, shortly after, my own mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so I moved home and decided to be a caretaker. And then I hopped back into my career after that.
Wow. Like, I am so impressed and taken aback by your story. Like, going from small town Tennessee to Atlanta, Georgia, which is a bigger town, but still not New York City, then to New York, and then completely dominating corporate. Like, we'll get into obstacles later, but some people, you know, their experience being in a smaller town, you know, that can be limiting for them. So to see how far you've come without exposure until college is truly amazing and impressive. So
Thank you.
and also what an example to take time to prioritize family and taking care of your mom over career. I think a lot of people, you know, feel pressure to focus on their career, you know, through their 20s and 30s and feel like they're going to be behind if they take a break. And so I'm just so happy that you shared that you did take that break and prioritize what was important, which was taking care of your mom. So
yeah.
wow,
And I'm going to be honest, I definitely fell behind. I didn't feel behind, kind of in the midst of it, because what was important was her health. And, that was all my focus at that point. But when she went into remission about 2 years later, and, she was able to kind of start going back to work and engaging with her own life, I started thinking about, okay, what does it look like for me to get back into the workforce? And at that time, all of my friends were getting manager positions, director roles. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have to start over. I'm starting from scratch. And so I was definitely worried about being behind. And in some cases at Estée Lauder, I felt like I was behind, but it made up for itself. Once I got to BlackRock, I kind of felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, given, my age and the timeline that I was on.
Yeah, amazing. Because it's like we don't always move at the same speed, and we take a break, we can accelerate.
Yeah.
So that's I'm glad. Obviously, it worked out for you, and I'm sure is an inspiration to someone out there just to hear that. Okay, so after you have now climbed the corporate ladder, rebounded, you're at Google. What made you to decide to pursue entrepreneurship in addition to a 9 to 5? And
Yeah.
I want to mention something that we connected on. You were involved in like the venture capital, community at Google and those networks. So like I saw that desire for entrepreneurship in you, and so I'm just so excited to hear like what flipped that switch for you.
Yeah. So in my first job, I think after the first 3 months there, I was like, I want to build my own company. Like that was just really important to me, because I was in a large and established and mature company, and I kind of saw how it was running, and I was like, I think I can do this. Like I think I can figure out how to do this. Thank God I didn't do it at that time, because I did not have the maturity or the skill to do so. But that seed was kind of planted really early on, and so I actually started thinking of business school. And, when you're applying to business school, usually they suggest, 3 to 5 years of work experience or so. And so at that point, I had made the decision that I was going to focus on that trajectory and try to get my 3 to 5 years in and then apply for business school. But, right around that kind of 2.5 year point is when my mom got diagnosed. So that really kind of made me pivot in terms of my plans. But I think that my interest in entrepreneurship was probably always there. Kind of, I think stereotypically I was the kid whose favorite game was Monopoly, like I was just kind of always really interested in business, and I just thought it was fun. I thought it was fun to create something brand new in the world and have people react to it and respond to it, and then grow it in the direction that, you see fit or your partner see fit. So I think I always really had that interest. And, luckily I've been at organizations like Google and BlackRock that, really, strong organizations, mature organizations, but relatively young, like it's not Walmart or GE. It's like companies that are on kind of this innovation curve. And so I've had the opportunity to be in really innovative cultures. And so I wanted to really understand entrepreneurship holistically, which is what drove me to VC, right? Because when you're a founder, sometimes you're looking to raise if you're not looking to bootstrap. And so I really wanted to understand from a investor's perspective, what does it look like to evaluate a company? What does a company success metric look like? So that's kind of how I got into venture capital. And it definitely was, something that I think accelerated my understanding of entrepreneurship and really how to build a solid foundation around the company.
Amazing. So that kind of leads us to your business. Like, please tell us more about at Opal and what you are doing.
Yes. Oh my goodness, Addy. Okay. If you can imagine this little Black girl on the Upper East Side of New York, just being like kind of awestruck and confused and also feeling just very broke, right? Because for those of you who may not be familiar with just the New York layout, the Upper East Side is kind of really the like echelon, one of the more expensive areas of New York. So there was more money on one block of the Upper East Side where I worked than there was in the entire county that I grew up in. And that was fascinating to me. I was mind boggled by that. And I just wasn't understanding how this money was flowing, like where people were getting all this money, like what were they doing with it? Like how was this coming to be? And I grew up in, again, a really small town, and Madisonville is not only small, it's also very socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so there's not, a lot of funding for our school systems. There's not a lot of, support for, our healthcare systems and things like that. So it was just a much different experience. And so I think like by week 2 of New York, I was like, no, I got to figure this out. Like I need to know what's happening. And I thought it was going to be as easy as kind of like asking questions and reading a book. Right. And that was so naive of me, because when people and not just our community, but like white people included, do not just like openly discuss money, or at least like we weren't at that time. It wasn't something that you just walked up to somebody and ask about. And a lot of the books were really starting at a level that I honestly was not at. They were assuming that there was a level of foundational knowledge that you had already acquired, and so you were going to be able to understand the context. And so that was not true. And I looked for finance coaches and financial planners and everything. And I think we all are probably familiar with how confusing the jargon can get. So I didn't even really know what specialist to look for. So I just had a really, really hard time trying to figure out, like, how do I learn about money? Like, what does this look like? And so I've spent kind of the past 10 years doing that and finding these books and, finding these forums and things like that to really educate myself. And I've been very lucky and very fortunate to make a lot of progress in that. But at Opal was really in response to me not having that, and me trying to create something in the world that I didn't have when I was experiencing this pain point.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing that, because we really aren't armed with a tool book. Like I think we had to take financial literacy in high school, for example, but like it was one class, one day. We're not prepared, and it's I think there's an assumption that this is just passed down within families, and not every family has that knowledge. So I'm so glad that you took. And also, like, so many people will talk about money. There's so many books, so many podcasts, so many courses, and a lot of them you don't know who to trust, and not that many of them are speaking directly to women or Black women. So
yeah,
I'm just so glad that you made something for us. And can you share a little bit more about how you treat like your Ed Opal audience different than maybe like the average personal finance? Like, is there a certain tone or language or vocabulary? How is it different?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said it's not a lot of voices out there that kind of speak directly to us. And when I was doing my research, that was the constant feedback, right? Like Black women everywhere were like, I am not being spoken to based on my unique needs and my unique experiences. And a lot of, I don't want to call them finance bros, because I feel like that has like a really negative connotation, but like I actually did try my hardest to implement some of the directives from a lot of the, for lack of better words, finance bros. And it just didn't work because we were operating at such a different context. You know what I mean? Like if you're a white man in America, especially if you're in a corporate setting, you have a very, very different career trajectory typically, and a very, very different income trajectory than a Black woman. You also are not dealing with the generational trauma that we as Black women experience when it comes to money. There are so many societal messages, so many generational messages that are telling us what our worth should be, what we should be able to afford, where we should be sitting in society. And I had to work through a lot of kind of that trauma and messaging myself when I was, experiencing my own journey. So one of the things that was really hard for me when I started making money, and I found this to be true for a lot of Black women, is that you start making this money and you're like, oh shit, like, is this real? Like, what do I do with this? Where do I put this? Or another common thing is like, it's never going to be enough, or I'm never going to have enough, or I can lose this at any moment. Right. And I think I think about this a lot. I had a conversation a few months ago with a Black woman who was like, I know that this feeling that somebody could take this from me or I could lose this tomorrow is not logical based on like the status of where I am in my company, based on like how much I'm making, based on what my savings is. Like, I should not be so terrified that I could lose this overnight, but I am. Like, that's a big fear. And I think this is important for us to have these spaces, because what I really wanted her to understand and what I tried to affirm for her is like that feeling is generational. Like if you look at our ancestors, and our, as early as our grandparents, any response to Black people and Black women having abundance of any kind, whether it's abundance of joy, abundance of resources, what have you, has always been met or often been met with a strong violence, right? And the point was to ensure that you understood that, yeah, you can build this and we can ruin it at any moment, and I think now those examples are starting to become more known. I know a few years ago, folks were finding out about Tulsa. We knew about Tulsa, but it's like, the point of that was like, yeah, you built Black Wall Street and we will burn it down at any moment. So, I really just wanted a space where I could validate for us, hey, these traumas, these concerns, these fears are passed down, they're real, they're valid, and here's how we work around them to create kind of the lifestyles and the financial security that we want.
Exactly. And I love that that's the narrative, that you're sharing with your business. It's not about we're never going to get ahead because we have these past traumas. It's about let's acknowledge the knowns and let's validate the knowns and share how we excel despite the challenges or the obstacles.
For sure.
So, amazing. Love that. So
thank you.
So we're going to get into more of challenges, but before we talk about challenges, I would love to hear what success means to you and which ways you consider yourself a success. What are the accomplishments in your life that you're most proud of?
Yeah, success for me at this point in my life means peace. And that is definitely just in response to having grown up in a pretty, I would say, a little bit of a chaotic environment. There was a lot happening, I think, for myself and for many of us just growing up, where there was either a lot of turmoil, a lot of chaos, a lot of pain that we were trying to kind of overcome. And so now I feel my most successful when I can kind of sit in my home and I'm like, I'm safe here. And I can be, in my skin and just be like, I'm safe here. And the people around me have the best intention for me here. And, I have what I need here, whether it's a full kitchen, and I have food stocked or, the right clothes, whatever it is. I think those are all things that really bring me peace and calm. And I think what I've been most proud of is my ability to kind of create my environment. I think oftentimes we grow up in environments that obviously are chosen for us, and they're not always as nourishing or supportive, or again, there's just a lot that goes on in the background of those environments. And I have been relentless in ensuring that the environment that I structure around myself, especially my people, are all folks who are kind of committed to that peaceful life, who are committed to self-improvement and self-growth and self-reflection, and who are really committed to healing and will help hold me accountable to my own, because we can all hide from our stuff, right? But I'm really proud of kind of that environment and the community that I've built around myself to help me do that.
Amazing. Peace and community, being surrounded by good people. I love these definitions of success, because it's, people may look at your resume and assume what your definition of success is. And there's a lot of people that, have the job, have the salary, have the wealth, but none of the peace. And so I love that. Okay. So on your path to success, was there ever a time that you doubted yourself or wanted to give up on pursuing your goals? And how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I doubt myself today. I think that doubt is something that you're always going to have, right? But I'm really grateful for my 20s, because I learned a concept really early in my 20s that's kind of guided me forward. So I wish I could remember who I was talking to, but it was kind of a sociologist, a psychologist, who was explaining kind of the concept of trust. And they were saying, when you're building a relationship with another human being and you're trying to decide whether or not you can trust them, you look for them to be reliable. You look for them to keep their word. You look for them to, commit to the actions that they say that they're going to take. And that's how you typically measure how trustworthy somebody is. And they're like, the only way to build confidence and trust in yourself is by doing that with yourself. You have to kind of prove to yourself that, yeah, if I say I'm going to do this, then it gets done. Or, if I am going to behave or show up in a certain way, then I commit to doing that. And so I spent my entire 20s doing that. And I think that's kind of why the 20s are hard for a lot of us, because we spend everything up to that point in a really structured and defined environment. Our elders and our folks around us, our adults, are defining the structure and environment for us. And then you get to your 20s and you've just completed college and you're out in the world, and you're now I have to decide, I have to define what this looks like. And so I spent my 20s kind of taking a lot of risk and proving to myself time and time again that I could do things. And then by the time I got to my 30s, I was like, okay, this is scary and I have a lot of doubts, but I have all of this evidence that, yeah, I can change careers, or I can change industries, or I can learn a new skill, or I can build a business. The doubt does not leave, but in building evidence, I've built confidence. So that makes it easier to take the leap, right?
I love that. Like Oprah would call that a tweetable moment. It's not about eliminating the doubts. It's about building the evidence. I love that.
Yeah. It's hard, but it's got to be done. And nobody can do it but you. So
absolutely. Yes. And a great reminder that even at, levels of success that like you've achieved levels of success that people watching may, not even feel comfortable dreaming of aspiring to, and knowing that you still have doubts, I think is really real and very humanizing. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
So what were some of the biggest challenges you faced pursuing your goals, and how did you navigate those?
Yeah. I mean, my first big challenge was when I had to be a caretaker, right? When I had to leave the workforce to be a caretaker, because I don't know if this is coming through in this conversation, but I am type A, y'all. I plan everything. Like I know what I'm supposed to be doing in 2034. Like I have kind of a step-by-step plan for what I want my life to look like. And at no point in time did I ever plan or think that my mother was going to one, be, mortal, and she was going to face the reality of being a human, or I was going to have to face the reality that she is human and she's going to leave me one day. And two, I definitely didn't prepare to be that responsible for someone that early or that soon in my life. And so that was super, super challenging, because especially throughout that process, I was like, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? Have I remembered all the medications? Do I have all the appointments together? Like what's going on? So I think that was a constant state of doubt. And then when she finally went into remission, it was still just kind of like, are we really out of the weeds? Like, are we good? Are we safe? Like what do I do? And I kind of like hovered around for a little while just to make sure things were good. And when I finally did see, okay, she's good. She's on the up and up. She's like back to herself. Like everything's fine. She's, back to her energy. The second thing that hit me was, now I have to get back to my life. And that was really hard, because I didn't know what my life was supposed to look like after that. I had this whole vision before that, and where I thought I would be by now. And all of that just felt very derailed. And so I felt like I had to literally start over and create, a new plan. And I don't like doing that. When I have a plan, I want that plan to be, executed. And so I didn't really know where to pick up the pieces from there. And so I kind of just went into action mode and was like, okay, well, let me just take steps and see where that lands. And so that was a real challenge for me. Because I got into the workforce, and unfortunately my first job right after that was terrible. I had a manager that didn't want to pay me. Like it was the worst. It was like the worst thing I could have stepped into right after a traumatic situation. So then I was questioning, my professional ability, right? Because all of my friends are getting these manager and director roles, and now I'm kind of starting over at the bottom, and I'm trying to figure out like, why, like, am I not as smart as I thought I was? Like, why am I not good at this job? Why does this manager hate me? So those things were really challenging. And that was probably some of the darkest 4 years of my life, until I kind of got out of those situations and ended up at BlackRock, where I felt like I kind of found my first professional family. But it was really a challenge, because it was so much unknown, and so much not just unknown about what the next step is, but unknown about like, who am I? Like, what am I good at? Like, I thought I would be this person and I'm not. So how do I figure out, who I want to be now?
Yeah, no, I could see how that could be really challenging, especially as a planner and everything, and has worked according to plan, to get a curveball and to bounce back. Like that's part of, being type A in some level, like knowing how to like reinvent yourself and building that muscle of adjusting to change. So what kept you going? Like I've totally been there, where I'm looking around at my peers and I'm like, wait, you guys are all at these big name companies and I'm at this, no name company. Like I deeply resonate with that feeling. Like what kept you going? What made you believe in yourself that you deserved that BlackRock, that Google position?
I don't know if I believed in myself all the time, but I think what kept me going was I didn't feel like I had another choice. It's like you either keep going or you stop. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you keep going or you settle. And one thing that my mom has always said about me, it's really funny. She's like, this girl does not settle. She knows what she wants and she's not going to negotiate it. And so if you want to convince her one way or the other, you got to get her before she makes up her mind, because when she makes up her mind, that's it. And so I knew kind of like when I started in that role at Estée Lauder that wasn't the best, I knew that I was not going to stop there. Absolutely not. Like I was going to have to find something that made more sense. And so I kind of sat with myself and I was like, what do I need? Like, what do I really want to be doing right now? And I just put out feelers, right? Like I didn't know where I was going to land, but I just kind of looked at stuff and took, opportunities to interview and like networked around. And I did find another role inside Estee Lauder that was far better. I had a far better manager, a far better team. I enjoyed the work a lot more, and it aligned with kind of the data analytics path that I wanted to be on. So it really just took me deciding, like, I'm not stopping here. I am going to get better than this. I don't know if I can get better than this, but I know that if I don't try, then it's never going to be a possibility. So I was just really determined to kind of not stop where I was.
Amazing. Having that grit. We've been talking about that at home.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's showing up every day, no matter what,
Yeah.
whether you believe in yourself or not.
Yeah.
So what are some pivotal moments, and you've kind of touched on some, so no need to like repeat, but what are some pivotal moments or decisions that shape your path for the better or for
Yeah.
worse?
Okay, so one of the most pivotal moments was absolutely BlackRock. So after my positive role at Estee Lauder, I had a moment to really sit down and think about what I wanted, right? Because I wasn't in desperation mode anymore. So I could, like, with clearness of mind, decide what I wanted to do. And my first thing was, I want to make more money. Like I just do, like I don't really care kind of about, following my passion anymore, or like doing kind of the cutesy thing like that. I want to make more money because there's a certain level of financial stability that I want to achieve. And at the time when I was looking at like who's paying money in New York, of course it was Wall Street, like it was
Yeah.
all the banks, it was all that. And so I made a decision. I said, I'm going to double my salary by the end of this year. And at the time I was dating a guy, and he was like, you're going to double you really think you could just double your salary overnight? And I was like, yeah, I do, because at this point I was starting to believe in myself. Like I had seen myself get myself out of negative situations before. So I was like, surely I can do it again. And so I made that decision, and I went to LinkedIn and I looked at as many people as I could find on LinkedIn who were currently at BlackRock. And I was specifically looking for Black women, because one of the things I did want to know is like, what is your experience here? And am I going to have to struggle here? Like, what does this look like? So I reached out to an older Spelman alum. She was, I think, 10 years before me. And then I reached out to a woman who had graduated from Howard. Both were exceptional. Both gave me all the tea, and both were like, girl, this is how you do this. And if you want to get in here, let me know, send me your resume. So I did that, and I interviewed at BlackRock, and I was actually interviewing for a job that was outside of data analytics, because I thought that I'd be able to sell myself more for that role, because the data analytics roles just seemed a little bit more technical. And I was like, I don't know if I have enough experience to do this. So I interviewed for that role, and the interview started to take like a really long time. And I was like, what's going on? Like, why do I have to keep doing all these interviews? And so after my final interview, they called me back and they're like, look, we've not done this before, but we're going to give you an option, because we think you could be really, really great in this data analytics role. But if you want this more kind of generalist HR role, and that's where you want to take your career, fine. You tell us which role you want and we will give it to you. And I was like, holy crap, like I was not expecting that call, And so I took the data analytics role because that's the path that I wanted to be on. And not only did I double my salary, but I found my people. And that was a pivotal moment for me professionally, because at BlackRock, I was super spoiled. Like all the leaders kind of took me up under their wing. Everybody wanted to mentor me. And I was just put in such positions of visibility and given so many opportunities to really kind of showcase myself and make connections across the company. And I was super supported there. And that was when I realized, like, oh, this is what I can do. This is what I can deliver when I'm in a space that really nurtures me and cares about me and, invest in me in the right way. And that upped my confidence exponentially. After that, I was like, oh, I can do anything. I don't have to be concerned about my ability to take on any role. And so I think that was a really, really pivotal moment for sure.
Amazing. It's that it sounds like BlackRock was your quantum jump.
For sure. It was.
Yeah. And amazing that you had we didn't mention that Spelman is an HBCU, and one of my biggest regrets is not learning more about HBCUs because that networking community is so strong. And I love that you tapped in specifically to Black women, because everyone's going to have a different experience at the same company on the same team based on how they show up, and seeing that lead you to a place where you're celebrated, nurtured, and encouraged to be in the spotlight.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So what is the biggest lesson that you've learned throughout your journey to success?
Definitely, it's critically important to find your people. I think at this age, I am all about alignment. And what I have learned is that when you're aligned, when you're in the right environments, when you're with the right people, when you're doing the right things, the world opens up for you. You can kind of produce whatever life you want to be experiencing with a great deal of ease. And I think that that's something that, especially with work cultures, I don't want to say that we negate the fact that you need to find your people, but it's just a little bit more difficult for Black women to find that, right? Because corporate spaces can be very violent to us, and I think I definitely had a unique experience at BlackRock and at Google, because I feel very supported at Google as well. And I know that every Black woman isn't experiencing that. But now, as soon as I start to notice, like, oh, my people are leaving, I think the time that I decided to leave BlackRock was a time where one of my favorite leaders was recruited by another company and took on, a super significant role in the C-suite of that firm. And I was like, oh, well, he's leaving and that sucks, but I can keep going. And then a few months later, a Black woman leader that I really loved and supported also left for another role. And that's when the light kind of went off for me. I was like, okay, my leaders are leaving, so now I need to go, right? And your leaders don't have to be Black, but they need to be the leaders that you respect, that are pouring into you. And I just think that it's so critically important for us to find our people in these workspaces, regardless of where we are, because when I tell you, it makes a 1,000 times difference in what you're able to achieve, what you're able to accomplish, how you feel day in and day out coming to and from work. Like it's just critically important. So that's a lesson that I have taken, and it's a lesson that I am definitely embedding into at Opal. I'm very, very picky about who works with at Opal, even if it's a vendor, because there's a certain culture that I want to develop and a certain space that I want to create that allows people to really flourish in the fullness of, whatever their talents may be.
Amazing. And I love the reminder of finding your people. This is, we've had 2 Black Women Boss episodes, and both of you mentioned the importance of community. And and I'm glad that we're talking about this, especially during COVID. There was no opportunity, or finding our people was completely different in the remote world, in the COVID world. What are some tips that you can share for the listeners on finding your people in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, don't ignore the red flags. I know so many of us, myself included, look for things like, look for things like salary or, whatever. And the other thing that I stand by is like, don't ignore salary. You know what I mean? Like if you need to take a job that pays you well, take it, but also have a plan to leave for something that both pays you well and nourishes you, because like we live in a capitalistic society, so like we need money. But I think for me, I learned, of course, how to find my people through trial and error, right? Like it takes practice. So I learned how to ask the right questions for me. And a lot of the questions, it's funny because my friends tease me about this. They say I'm always asking hard questions, but I am always asking questions about how do you give feedback? What does that look like? When was a time that you received feedback, negative feedback from a subordinate, and how did you respond? that question is super telling, because if I ever have a leader tell me, I never got bad feedback from a subordinate, that lets me know that your subordinates probably don't feel safe enough to tell you, or they did give you bad feedback and you didn't listen. So the hard questions and the questions that matter, asking those is critically important to me. And I don't want to, give anybody the misconceptions that asking hard questions doesn't backfire, because it absolutely has. I've been in situations where I've asked hard questions and people have taken that very negatively, or they don't want to be asked about, that question. And the subordinate feedback one is one of the big ones, and I've lost, I don't want to say I've lost opportunities, but I have not received opportunities because, the folks did not want to deal with those types of questions. But that meant that the environment was not going to be healthy for me. It was probably going to be toxic for me. So I think really taking the time to figure out, what is it do you need? Do you need to be given feedback in a certain way? Do you need to be in a culture where appreciation is shown, and how often? Like what is it that you need? And then be willing to ask those questions to the folks in the environment before you kind of embed yourself in it, because usually people will tell you who they are if you give them the opportunity.
Yes, I love that. I see it as you filtering people out, like if and I think as Black women, sometimes we can come in just wanting so badly to be accepted and fit in and conform ourselves to the culture, as opposed to thinking about what we actually need to thrive and be supported ourselves. So I love that you have these questions that you ask in the interview to find, make sure you're in a place that's nurtured.
Yeah.
Wow. So who or what were some of your biggest inspirations along the way? Whether it's mentors, books, podcasts?
So this is really funny because, and I don't want this to come off the wrong way. So I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. But there was a time in my life where I was like, mentorship is BS. Like people are not.
We can tap in.
Yeah, on that, people are. Yeah, and I think Spelman was all about networking and finding mentors. I remember they used to tell us, find your notable alumni, ask them questions and all that. And I appreciated that, right? Like it coached me up. It let me know how to navigate the world and how to find the right people to ask for help. But I think it was around 2013 or 2014 or 2015 where I was talking to another Spelman sister, and I was like, girl, is it just me, or is this mentorship stuff dead? What is it? What's going on? And she's like, yeah, no, I'm not finding the right people. And the reason that we were experiencing that is because at the time where we had outgrown our environments, right? And we were still looking to our current environments to find the mentors that we need. And it wasn't until we both pivoted where we realized we were just asking the wrong people, it was that thing where it's you're asking these questions, but you're asking questions to people who've never done this. So for instance, when I really started to try to, take a keen interest into entrepreneurship, right after I got back into the workforce, I was asking executives at these big companies and CEOs in these big companies were how do I do this? How do I start a business? How do I do that? And all they wanted to talk to me about was climbing the corporate ladder. And I was like, well, yeah, no, I get that. Y'all have coached me on that part. I've been through all these leadership programs. I know what it looks like to climb the ladder. And I was just like, why is nobody really helping me figure out what I need? And so I had to completely change my network and the industries with which I was operating. And it wasn't until I did that where I started finding other founders or other venture capitalists or people who could give me really practical and applicable feedback around, if you want to build a business by yourself and if you want to do it at scale, this is how you do it, but I was asking people who had never done that before. And so it was really hard for them to answer that question. And I also may have been asking the wrong questions, right? There were times where I didn't always know how to articulate what I wanted to do. But I think it's so critical to find the right people. And again, that takes practice too, everything in life takes practice, but, I was kind of over mentorship at one point in time, but I will say that I have found good mentors now in terms of entrepreneurship.
Well, that's great. I call it going to the hardware store for milk when we're asking just the right questions to the wrong people. Recently I decided that mentorship wasn't for me because I
Mhm.
was immediately putting myself in a subordinate position to someone who
Yes.
I had no idea how they even got to where they are.
Right.
And I was
Exactly.
putting them on a pedestal that I may not have needed to do. So
Right.
I'm totally with you on mentorship.
Yeah,
Sponsorship is the new buzzword. Do you believe in
for sure.
sponsorship?
So I don't believe they should be different. I think
Right.
if you're willing to mentor somebody, why would you not be willing to sponsor them? Like, I think that it's and I think we can talk about this on this podcast. Edit it out if we can't. But I think that this mentorship versus sponsorship was really kind of a cop out for white people in
Yeah.
power to not have to like give up power or position people of color for opportunities because I am a mentor now. Like I actively take time
Mhm.
to support like the younger generation. And there's when I notice that there's someone that I'm mentoring that I would not be willing to, provide a sponsorship or recommendation for, I let them know that at that point, and I'm like, hey, if you want me to be putting you in front of these people, I need you to step it up in this way. And it's like,
Mhm.
why would
Yeah.
all mentors not do that? You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
sometimes people really don't know what they're missing. They wouldn't be asking you the questions if they had the answers. So I
Yeah.
just don't think that they should be different. I think that if you're gonna be a mentor, then you should take the responsibility of getting that person into a position where you feel comfortable enough putting
Yes.
them into these spaces because otherwise what good are you?
I'm so glad you talked about that because it really was a mentor is the answer. And then whenever we ask the mentor to action on their support, it's like, oh, I can't do that. And I
Yeah.
100% agree with the whole it being a cop out. And I also find that it's something that like disadvantaged groups are always encouraged to do in a way that like
Yeah.
majority groups are not encouraged to do. So I'm
Exactly.
with you. You heard it here first. Question mentorship. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so looking ahead, what are your goals for the future and what impact do you hope to make?
I obviously hope to get at Opal to a point where I'm working on that full time. Like I really believe that that is my life. If not my life, then like a large season of my life's work. It's something that I've been so passionate about for a really long time. And in terms of the impact, one of the most important stories that I have from Ed Opal was before it was actually Ed Opal. So before that, it was kind of a small group learning session, like where we have like a small cohort of folks. And one of the women who participated in the cohort came back to me sometime later, and she had been supporting her sister, helping her sister, who's a single mom. And she's like, yeah, like I learned all this stuff in this cohort. I was able to like teach my sister, and like we got a budget together, and she's got so and so ready to go to school now, and like she was just so excited, and I could tell that it was really um a moment of like peace, not just peace, but empowerment, where it's like, okay, I can take this and teach it to somebody else and I can help somebody that I care about. And that was actually what made me decide to build Ed Opal into a company because I've always felt that I don't believe in legacy. Like, I don't really care what people think about me after I'm dead. I'm going to be dead. So, like, whatever. I've always felt that like my impact should be one that can be sustained without me. And so if
Mhm.
I can help somebody go off into the world and help the people that they care about and go to their communities and help their communities in a really authentic way, in a way that I could never do, right? Because I'm not in those communities, then that's what I should be doing. Like that's the impact I want to be making. And that's what I want to do with Ed Opal. I don't intend to build Ed Opal as something where people have to be there, have these lessons throughout their life. I hope that they come and they build their knowledge and then they go out into the world and they teach their own kids or their own siblings or whomever. I want them to be able to do it without me. And I just, I'm trying to create the space where, they can begin that journey. So that's the impact that I want to have. I want it to be sustained without me. I want it to go beyond me. And at some point, we will exist in a world where Ed Opal is no longer needed.
Wow, what an amazing impact. I think your take on legacy is interesting, but to have that continuing impact
Yeah.
is really cool. So I did get questions.
Okay.
So we're going to answer a few questions from the chat. So someone from LinkedIn asked, what specific skills did you acquire to become a people analyst?
Yeah. Okay. So there's so many different things, so many different skills that you can acquire to be a people analyst. So my path is not the end all be all. You can do this a lot of different ways. But when I took my good job at Estée Lauder, I expressed that I was really interested in this work, right? And so I took a few kind of like online data analytics courses, and then I went to my boss and I was like, "Hey, General Assembly is having like this, 6, whatever the length of the program was at the time, all around data science. You learn Python, you learn some of the other things. And I really want to do this. I think it would make me a better employee." And she was like, "Yeah, go for it. We'll pay for it." And so I took this General Assembly course at night for a few months, and learned some of those coding languages so that I could learn how to better kind of wrangle and clean, and gain insights from data. And then from there, everything else I learned was on the job. So when I took the role at BlackRock, all of that work and all of that upskilling really happened in my day to day, where I had to kind of teach myself, okay, I'm in this unique situation. Like, what's the right scripting to write for this? And the same with Google. And I think that's true for all of us that work at Google, right? Because everything in Google is pretty much built by Google. So like, you don't have your typical kind of SQL platform. You have a Google specific platform where you write SQL, but you have to learn the Google platform. So a lot of the work was on the job, but there's a lot of courses out there now that offer the opportunity to really upskill yourself with data and analytics. And I think I would just be mindful, if you're looking to go on this path, kind of what direction you want to go. So you can also take, the HR route like I did. You can be in product. There's all these different spaces that you can be in, and they really demand a different skill set. So I would first kind of question, where you're looking to land. And then I would have conversations with people in those spaces to see what they did, because that's probably more applicable than just this general explanation that I kind of gave that worked for me.
Amazing, valuable information. So I will also, I've heard great things about General Assembly. So I'll drop that in the show notes.
Yeah. A
So
lot of companies pay for it too. So if you're like
yeah.
already employed and you have tuition reimbursement, a lot of companies will support that.
Yes. Your reminder to use your benefits.
Please use your benefits.
Yes. Ask for the money for your professional development. Okay. So I had another question from TikTok. So, and you do not need to be specific here, but Perfectly Blue asks, what is the earning potential in data analytics?
Oh, yeah. So that's going to depend on your industry. That's going to depend on kind of where you are. So, for instance, if you're in product, you're probably going to make more than HR. And that has a lot to do with the fact that product is a revenue generating function. So they bring in money to the business, whereas HR is more like, kind of logistical and stabilizing the business and things like that. So it really depends. You can definitely make 6 figures depending on where you are. I think like our VP of data analytics at Google probably is making lots and lots of money, but there's significant earning potential, and there's all this kind of confusion or question around AI. And I don't think this is a space where that should be a concern, because you will always need humans to be able to define the content and the context of what you're working on within the data, in a way that I just don't see artificial intelligence being able to do, because you have to teach artificial intelligence how to do that. Whereas like a human being is already going to know that context and be able to learn it. So I think that, with AI, there's probably going to be even more earning potential, because, the opportunity to make these analyses quicker or to make them more concise is just going to, it's going to pop, those opportunities are going to pop up. But there is significant earning potential, and you can do really well in the space.
Amazing. Excellent response. Hopefully you caught that, Perfectly Blue. The recording will be online in perpetuity. All right. So that is all of our questions. I have the final question, which I ask every episode, which is, I'm answering what am I geeked out about this week, but as the Black Woman Boss series, I'd love to hear what you're geeked out about this week. Something fun, something that piqued your curiosity, something intriguing.
Yeah. So I am really geeked out because next week is my birthday. I am taking the entire week off, and I'm taking the whole week to rest. And I haven't like really rested in in a few months. So I'm really excited to kind of just be at home. I think for my birthday, we're going to go to this place called Main Event where you have like games and bowling and all this kind of stuff. So
Nice.
I'm excited once again to be like with my community in like a really fun and organic way. And I'm geeked out to celebrate another year. I think, you know, every year, some people are really weird about aging, Addy. I don't know what that is, but I actually really enjoy aging. I have enjoyed my process and my experience into adulthood. And so I'm always really grateful when I get to celebrate another year.
Yay, happy early birthday,
Thank
Scorpio
you.
season. So I'm so glad that you're taking time off. We always need a reminder to rest, rejuvenate,
Yeah.
recuperate, and also have fun.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Khayla, for coming on the podcast or the show. You're welcome back anytime. You're now a friend of the pod. And check out Ed Opal. I will have the links in the show notes. Any final words you'd like to share with the audience? Anything else that you would like to plug?
Yes, please check out Ed Opal. Thank you all so much for being here and listening to me. I always find it so funny when people listen to me talk because I'm in my head. But yeah, and I just think like we're coming up on a really, and I don't want to get political, but we're coming up on a really interesting election season. I hope that everybody's taking care of themselves and really giving themselves an opportunity to rest, because there's been a lot of unrest this year. 2024 has been a very crazy year for a lot of folks. So I hope as we enter Q4, you're just, you know, loving yourself, spending time with people who love and care for you, and that you continue to take care of yourself through this election season, regardless of how it goes. And, you know, you lean on your community and your network.
Yes, love that. And also, please vote.
Yes,
Yeah.
please vote. Please vote.
Yes.
Early
Yes,
voting in Georgia is already going on. So if you live in Georgia, vote early, get ahead of it, and get it done.
100%. Thank you again for that reminder to take care of ourselves. And we will see you on the internet. And I hope you have a good night.
You too. Thank you again so much for having me. And bye, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Bye.